Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm your host today, Kieran Lewis, a freelance graphic designer based in South London. And today is part two of Sin Lagos is Adobe live stream, who's a street photographer and graphic designer. Sin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've been actually really enjoying my entire day. I've been on the computer reviewing everything that we did yesterday. And yeah, I'm excited to get going.
Very organized and strategic. I love that.
Yeah.
Straight away getting into it. So just a few things before we get into the real flow of it. If you guys are viewing via YouTube, amazing, but pop over to Behance, and that way we can feed your comments directly to Sin while she's designing. So you can catch that on b.net/Adobe Live, and we can again put your comments and share them directly with Sin. I can see already in the chat, we've got people coming in thick and fast. We've got Sam moderating great, Vanessa, PJ, Steve, Oliver, massive welcome to you all. And just a very quick thing to say before we again get started is, as usual, start your day if you can with some Photoshop creative challenges posted by Wade Acuff every weekday at 9 a.m. Pacific. So tune in and challenge yourself every day of a new prompt. It's a good one, definitely do it. And also, today is also a really awesome one because we have our Artist Spotlight. So if you're very new to the Artist Spotlight or to Adobe Live, this is a segment of the show where we basically show a bit of love, pay a bit of homage to a celebrity, celebrate a creative, I should say. They're basically a celebrity, but we celebrate a creative from the community. So that'll be latter part of the day. So definitely stay tuned for that. But right now, Sin, we're all about you, who you are, what you're about, and what we're working on for today.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, I'm really excited to check out that new designer. I mean, that designer /celebrity.
I set the tone now. Yeah. They are celebrity.
So my name is Sin Lagos. I am a Latin American visual storyteller. I focus on graphic design, photography, and film at the moment, but always love learning new things. Today, we're going to be exercising a little bit of the motion side of the things that I'm interested in. And so we'll be jumping on After Effects, where we will continue to do what we were working on yesterday, which was a really cool poster design composite. Some of my work, some of the things I've been focused on as of late. I love mentoring artists like yourself, and especially love doing that through live streams because it's such a special kind of space where we can interact with each other while still kind of work together. So I've been doing quite a bit of that on Behance Lives. And I focus on a little bit of everything, honestly, but primarily graphic design, photography, some film here and there, sprinkle it in however I feel like I can get like really excited and experimenting, and I love sharing that. So if you want to check that out, it's Sin Lagos, and yeah, so I'm excited to get started today on a little bit of what we did yesterday. And so I can brief you guys on what that looked like in case.
Sounds like a plan.
Your first time.
I mean, yesterday kind of like went by super quickly, and I feel like again today.
I know, it did.
A nice little recap for those who maybe missed part one, and then let's crack into part two for sure.
Yeah, sure thing. So yesterday we were focusing on repurposing some of our images, maybe some photos that you have sort of collecting some digital dust in your drives, and basically coming up with a reinvention of how you express your visuals. So in this case, I had these 4 images that I took in Big Bend National Park in Texas, my new home, by the end of May, which I'm so excited about. Yeah, very exciting. And I really love, this experience, being able to test my skills in astrophotography, which if you've ever tried it, it's definitely challenging, definitely has its like kind of rules when it comes to tech that you gotta follow in order to really get a little bit of that beautiful Milky Way through your images. I was really proud of my results, but I wanted to do something different. And I got to experimenting and found myself recreating this into a poster design which I called Found My Own Universe. I'm really inspired by the universe in general. I've always have. I think that was actually the first job I wanted to have. I wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to be an archaeologist. Yeah. So basically,
you set the limits very high.
I know.
I like that.
You know, when you're a kid, you're like, sure.
Astronaut, physicist, yeah.
Cool. So I do see that this kind of blends into some of my work sometimes. Yeah, I love the show Lost in Space. If you haven't watched it,
show. Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
Check it out. Oh, you watched it?
I am, yeah. And it's actually really cool that you mentioned, like, even though obviously you're a designer, but it's still bringing an interest that you had from when you were young. Like you said, you love space, and it's nice, isn't it? Like a little 360 in a way where it's come back. That's a cool thing to really be exploring, definitely.
Yeah, it sometimes it takes a little bit to allow yourself to insert sort of your personality into your work, because you're trying to do what's maybe technically sound, so much so that you kind of leave your own expression behind. Yeah, this was actually a result of me just playing, which I think is very, very important in my process in general. I didn't think it was going to become a Adobe Live project, but I'm really glad it did. Yeah.
I love that.
So today we're going to be doing the motion part of that, which is going to look something like this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Bringing together all of the different images and which we did yesterday. And then now we're going to bring in the elements and animate it. This is kind of a quick time lapse of that.
That's really cool. And what program will you be using today primarily for your animating, would you say?
So I'll be using After Effects. I'm going to focus on After Effects. Some of these things you can definitely exercise in Premiere if that is your tool of choice. I think After Effects is really good at specifically animating objects, right? Like vector objects and things of that nature. So I do enjoy it. I think it's nicely focused, but you can do some of the things we're going to do today in Premiere with the same principles, especially if you're just starting. Having an understanding of the timeline and getting sort of like more acquainted with the software is really important. I know for me, I was very much like intimidated by the environment of After Effects or Premiere, because it does seem so complex that you kind of get lost in the way. Where do I begin? I think some small like workflow lessons we'll learn today will help you kind of just get sort of like a nice grounding. And to be fair, that's a really good point, because like most programs, when you first see it for that initial time, it can be very daunting, especially if you're very new to the space. But it's nice that even today when we go through your process, it's nice to sort of see how it's the start to finish. And again, for anyone who's sort of tuning in, any questions that you might have relating to Sin's design process, Sin's background as well as a creative, definitely share that in the chat, and I'm sure we would love to kind of answer that as we kind of go through it. I know from me and my personal experiences, Premiere, I've used Premiere quite a few times, but After Effects, I'm quite new to that, so I'm super excited to sort of see you get into the swing of it soon, because it's very much new to me, After Effects, but I do appreciate it as a background. Yeah, I really appreciate it too, because it's one of those steps that I can't, we talked about this yesterday, which was if you don't know, especially there's the part where you're trying to learn the technicality of the software, but then there's the artistic part, which is okay, but what do I animate, and what ideas do I have in that respect? One of the ways that I like to find ideas to create animations in After Effects is actually to start directly in Photoshop or whatever software I'm working on, and recognizing that any of these moves can be animated, any of the moves that I can already create here.
Nice.
All right. If I can make something, for example, disappear, like with the opacity, right? I can definitely do that same exact action in After Effects. Or for instance, I think we had a couple masks here. Let me just create one here just to show an example.
It's almost like a nice surprise when, excuse me, when things sort of happen, you change the opacity or go through different filters and you're like, oh, okay, that looks pretty cool. And you're kind of like, you're playing around until you find that thing that really, really works well. It's really cool.
Yeah, and it'd be surprising if you take like a mental note of, oh, well, that could actually end up looking really nice if I animate it from point A to point B. And so this is an example where this is actually pretty neat animation where I'm using a mask to be able to reveal and hide some elements. And just by moving the layer within that mask, I'm able to showcase a certain motion. And it's kind of interesting, right? So there's a lot of different ways. I always like to think of how can I animate, for example, the background, or how can I animate some of the titles in my work too. So it really feels like an introduction to something pretty epic. I think I like to emulate posters, like movie posters, quite a bit. Whenever I go to the theater, like one of my things that I like doing is by the end of it, I stare at all the posters.
I love that.
I think about how they were done, and sometimes they're very surprising. I mean, some of the rules are exactly the same. Great layout. Orange and blue are very popular, especially with superhero movies.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like knowing that kind of like that style that it could be so subliminal. We maybe just gonna in our normal day we just kind of miss it, right? But it's quite cool that you notice those little attention to details, whereas like things that even fonts that they use as well in certain, whether it's a scary film or comedy, these kind of use certain styles of fonts. I think that's quite cool when you kind of pick up on that.
Scary films sometimes have this like very minimalistic approach where they just have like one single thing and it's sort of mysterious and hidden, and then the title, very simple. We did a little bit of a different text yesterday, but I think I'm going to stick with this one because I really like it. You're welcome to do, your own expression of, maybe yours looks very different from this. Your collection of photos may be a bit more bright. Whatever the case, I think what we're hoping to learn here is how to repurpose our images, create new compositions, new expressions, and then find a way to animate that design. So I'm gonna get this file ready to move it on to After Effects, and then we can jump into After Effects.
Awesome. We've got a question actually from, so whilst you're doing it as well, from Ferry, and it kind of touches on a bit like, your work process, or this project, or even projects, but from previous. So Ferry's asking, do you prefer to wing it or do you plan it well? I guess it depends, but what's your kind of what's your jam? Are you a wing kind of person?
Yeah, I think we had a little bit of that insight on. Sometimes, sketching is really fun because it's so fast and you can sketch multiple ideas at once. So I definitely encourage anyone to sketch. Actually, in school, we always, my typography professor would be very keen on, which is really interesting because typography is very digital, right? But he would let us know, back in the days, it wasn't that way. He would work really hard for a typo, and he would have us sketch the fonts. And so sometimes he would ask us to redo it because he would say, well, you sketched that, but that's actually a bold Bodoni. That's not quite right. You went a little bit too far with the marker. And allowing us to understand that attention to detail was really precious. He also taught us layout design when it came to like using the typography in the space. And it really gave me a more of an appreciation for sketching. So I definitely encourage that.
I feel like when you were saying that idea of drawing type, it kind of reminds me of when we were even going back to school days, we have handwriting classes. I don't know if you ever had that growing up, but we used to have like a text on the board and you kind of copy it and you do it joint up. And it's very much a case of just whether it's, getting certain letters correct and not missing anything out. And, it's that attention to detail, which you might sometimes miss when you're on the screen, but when it's like pen to paper, it's so granular detail, which it kind of gets lost sometimes, I guess, when it's on screen.
Yeah, but that's a really good question. I mean, I also advocate for winging it because in this case, it was totally fun,
Yeah.
just winging it. But that kind of comes with time, right? Like, because then you have so many layouts and ideas in your head already. It's just like an archive, like a vault of references, but that takes time to kind of harness.
Like your mind palace, isn't it, of just different sort of creative chambers. And yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
It's a dedication, really.
Pretty much, definitely. I mean, I think Ferry as well. It'd be good to know what's your style. Are you a wing it person? Are you a planet person? And again, anyone in the chat, what's your, always quite keen to know what everyone's different ways of working is. And again, it could be a case of when you've got deadlines, do you have to maybe be more strategically planned, or if you're good at winging it, then yeah, let us know, and I'll share them with Sin and we can discuss them more.
So in order to get this file ready, one of the most important things, two important things, I would say: label your files so you're able to find, this will transfer over to After Effects. So if you label your files, you don't get too, rattled when you can't figure out which layer was which. The second would be to make sure to create, to right click your file and make them all smart objects. So in this case, I have these rasterized file. You can tell because it doesn't have, I forget to turn this on, because it doesn't have the little square here on the corner. So once you right click and make it a smart objects are really a great way to work non-destructively also. So at any point I can double click in here and go into that file. And if I choose to modify it, if I choose to write something on it, let's say lorem ipsum, because we're very Latin here, and just leave it like that. Once I save, it saves there, right? Which is really, really cool to just know that we have sort of these small compartments of where my file exists. And when I do things to this file here, like change the color or anything else, it's applying to this and not necessarily to the source file itself. Like the source file over here exists the way you want, you've kept it. So it's a very non-destructive way of working. I just wanted to mention that because smart objects are just very helpful. I think they go unnoticed oftentimes, but especially if you're trying to do mock-ups or things of that nature, I feel like just setting up your template, I'm gonna save that again so it doesn't have the text. It's that easy, it's linked. You'll see here is a PSB file. So that's how you know, and it'll save, and it moved it a little bit for me, but that's okay, I can just move it back.
That's a very good point on the smart object, because it excuse me, I feel like that's one of those sort of underrated little functions that sometimes is going to slip through the cracks. And if you know how to use it, it just makes things so much more streamlined in terms of keeping things organized, and then you can dip in and dip out. So if you're quite new to the smart object world of Photoshop in the chat, definitely explore that, because it's quite a cool tool.
So that definitely make all of your files smart objects, and I'm just going to save this. But on that note, actually somebody said yesterday, if I download any resources online or anything of that nature, and one of the things that I like to do is I do like to download some templates online to just see the way that other designers prep their files. Because I see how they were able to make it so readily available to templatize something and mock up something that would otherwise look very complex. And oftentimes they're using smart objects.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
You just remind me of that. It's a bit of a design joke, but sometimes you can get an asset online and you think it's a PNG, and it's basically not a transparent layer. It's just basically a solid, and it's just like a "you fooled me once" kind of thing, where you go in thinking it's a transparent and it's not. If anyone knows about that, that's one of those design sort of jokes you get.
One of those things that happen.
Yeah, but it's a very good point though, because it allows you to kind of understand how other people operate and how they work with design files. And even if you're in the freelance world and you send a file, say, to a client, and when they open it up, how do they view it as well? I guess trying to understand how people operate and how they kind of go through the programs, which is which is cool.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to have some people on the chat as well, showing their ways of working. We've got Vanessa who said, 90% of the time, I don't start with a solid plan out idea. As I'm winging it, in the ideas just pop out. So I'm happy to make mistakes. So that's a good point.
That's a good attitude.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got the opportunity just to have a bit of fun and, you know, making mistakes, that's all part of the journey, right? Which is good. And Ferry said, I only plan well for the clients, and my composite, but usually it takes longer. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because the execution itself takes a lot longer, especially when I've never been shy of maybe pitching a project based on sketch form. I know you said yesterday that maybe like you don't have like the best sketching skills, and that's okay. Like you'll be surprised what you can get away with when it comes to pitching a project, and if you're able to verbalize it well, having that like extra visual cue at the start of it is really, really helpful. So I sometimes
say that, but
sketch
I'm
logos.
good at cartoon drawings. Sorry.
Oh, you're good at cartoon drawings?
I was going to say, yeah, without going to a piece there, and yeah, I mean, but sorry, go through what you were saying before.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like in the past I've pitched like logos in sketch format first, because talking about time-intensive work, logos take a long time to create. Now I feel like they're a little bit easier to access because you know, we have so many tools. I think the iPad is really wonderful at creating logos, especially anything cursive. But, you know, when I first started, it wasn't the case, especially with, it's a lot of, you know, hours, human hours, just trying to like develop the work. And then you want to pitch as many as you can based on like the assessment. And so like having to have spent all of that time digitizing something that's going to be rejected is a really bad use of your time, especially if you're a freelancer. So I would often sketch really well done sketches that leave very little ambiguities if we were to convert them into smart objects. But that would actually be a really pleasant conversation. They love the craftsmanship. They love the way we're able to, and then I would put it together into a presentation that was digital. So that still doesn't look like too rough. I'm not pulling my very sticker filled kind of sketchbook. It's a bit more depending on your client. Maybe there's a client that likes the sticker filled sketchbook.
I love that. That's a very good point. I guess it's sort of knowing that's quite some good questions for anyone in the chat who, if potentially you're freelance, or even if you maybe are looking into freelance, how you deal with clients and, their perspective on how they might view your work, any kind of questions that you might have, Sin has, definitely got a lot of experience in that space. So get those questions in regarding to process design and we'll get them answered.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just saving this here. I saved it and then I lost track of where I saved it, because as much as we claim to multitask, I like focusing.
When you're live on Adobe, sometimes it's the Adobe Hemisphere word kind of takes you in and you almost forget where you are.
Yeah, sometimes, I'm just envisioning,
It's all good. Floating through the Milky Way. And
yeah. Floating through the Milky Way. Yeah.
A good time to mention as well. It's so for anyone who maybe just joined, a massive welcome and thanks for joining us. And today we're in part 2 of Seeing Lagos's Adobe live stream, who's a street photographer and graphic designer. And today we're in the process of After Effects and doing some animation to her collage design. So massive welcome. And again, if you're on YouTube, pop up the Behance and we'll get those questions straight onto the chat and we can discuss them. So welcome.
Yeah, and I love to have a conversation about your, career development too, because I think that's something that I definitely benefited a lot from, like having a network of designers that could talk to me about like their experience in the field. I think unless you're in the field, like there's very little ways of like just knowing how the process works or where things tend to work out for you depending on what criteria of work you're pursuing. yeah, anything like that is also really interesting.
That's a very good point. I mean, I always find, like, especially when I go to talks or read design blogs or even chat forums, like now, I love to hear about people's experiences, and sometimes not necessarily all the good things. And I don't mean a negative thing, but it's nice to know about maybe the things that went wrong. So it's that sort of transparency of, what can you do as a career, or even as a junior maybe, or graduate, in terms of looking out for in terms of your own career, because it's very easy to kind of show off the shiny final presented things, but actually it's that journey that went there, things that went wrong, and it's good to share. And obviously sometimes that takes a bit of time because it's a confidence thing, but I think that makes us more human, when you can kind of share those flaws and do it.
Troubleshooting a little bit here.
It's not why it's play ball. That's one thing I do love about, obviously, a lot of Adobe programs, the little artwork thumbnails that you get, like on the screen now. Where they're very cool.
Sometimes I'm not really sure who they're from, and then I've surprised myself and found the actual Behance profile of the person that did it, and
nice.
and I was like, oh, there it is.
I think, if I'm right in saying, I think sometimes the artwork name might be on the site, or even when you go into your program. And I feel like there's something in preference where you can actually find out about who's being featured. Because there's some amazing work that is kind of showcased for the programs. So yeah, it's a good one.
I don't know why I can't find this file, so give me a bit here.
So, and whilst we're doing that, I mean, in the process, it's a good time to sort of say today, we've also got our artist spotlight. So you can probably see, if you're in the Behance chat, you can see at the very top, we've got a little tab called Artist Spotlight. And that's your opportunity to submit your recommendations. And hopefully, we'll pick one of those, and they could be potentially on the next Adobe Live as our Artist Spotlight. So, get submitting, and obviously stay tuned for later on today. We're going to show us, a very cool, we said celebrity, didn't we? But a very cool creative, who's a celebrity in our world, but also a very, very cool designer too. So stay tuned for that, because it's going to be a good one. So maybe you can join us.
Yeah, I think portfolio reviews is one of my favorite things to do in general, because I get a sense of how what the audience is doing at the moment. I feel like what artists are doing now, because it changes up so much.
Definitely. It'd be good to know as well, for those in the chat, where do you kind of get your source of inspiration from? There's a lot of, especially with Behance, and for anyone who's quite new to Behance, because that is a very cool platform in a sense where you've got a lot of creators from all across the globes showcasing work. So again, if you're on Behance and that's that's new, then that's awesome. It'd be great to know where do you get your source of inspiration from. Sharing is caring, get in the chat, and hopefully we can kind of compare and see where you get your inspiration from.
Where do you get your inspiration from?
Where do I get? Do you know what? I feel like it's changed during pandemic, where you're on the screen for so long. I've tried to get inspiration from even just going for a walk with the Moleskine book, and just I say I don't like drawing. I love drawing. I'm just not very good at it, but unless it's cartoon characters, of course. But I tend to draw out, especially editorial, what I do. I try to draw out ideas and flat plans, sometimes away from the screen. But if I'm on the screen, then I've got a whole bookmark system of Pinterest, Behance, there's just way too many things to kind of
Behance has so much
the Behance
in general, even outside of design, outside of just graphic design or anything that I'm into. I feel like I find so much inspiration for there's all of the different experiences for event design, and it's mind-boggling sometimes. That's not necessarily something I do, and I just find some inspiration in different areas. It's a good practice, I think, to try out, to find something else.
It's good. It's good books for the mind, right? I mean, you can very strategically see there's
so many.
Books.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to try and pretend like they're all mine. Most of it is my fiance's, but I mean, I've got occasional magazines. But yeah, that's a very good point, because sometimes I think we all seem to forget where it's very easy to have everything just digitally, but actually you might have magazines, print. Now we can do things after pandemic where you can go to galleries, exhibitions. There's so much ways you can be inspired and take influence from something. But how are we looking on the?
It's better. Okay, so
Yay.
so this is usually much easier, but I couldn't find my file. So what we're gonna do here, what you want to do is import your PSD file, and a few steps to do before you click OK. You're gonna get this question here. It's probably gonna default to footage because more often than not, you're importing a video. But in this case, we're importing a PSD file with multiple layers within them. So what we want to do is import it as a composition with retained layer sizes, and editable layer styles is good. So we're going to click OK, and that's going to import. And now what you want to do is double click that. I'm going to make this a little bit taller here by just dragging it. We're going to double click that. And first and foremost, I think we should get acquainted with the environment that we're in. So you're going to be finding all of your source files here on the left-hand side, especially right away when you open After Effects. This is more or less the layout that you're going to encounter. If you don't see something like that, then you could always go to Windows Workspace and just hit Default. This workspace area is a lot of fun because maybe you have a smaller monitor or you're working with two monitors. This is a good way to take advantage of the modular part of Adobe Creative Suite in general, where you can drag all of the different windows and make it kind of custom to you, what works for you, and just save it as a workspace. I do that often because I work from here on this desktop, but I also work off of my smaller MacBook, and it's nice. Very small, right?
Got to utilize the space, right?
you have to think, okay, well, maybe I'm working on this right now, and I'll just customize it so it works here. I don't get to use two monitors, so that's something good to know. But if for default, you're always going to find your source files here on the left, the timeline here at the bottom, and then your preview here on the center. And you can just drag all these edges if you want to have more visibility of one of the windows. Another thing that I think is kind of cool is that if you hit that little squiggly line right above the tab button, I don't really know the right term for that, but you're able to click on any given window and have that that kind of full size preview of it. Nice. So it comes in handy when you're like, for example, in your timeline and you want to kind of really zoom in there and get a sense of just to feel a little bit less overwhelmed by all the things. Yeah.
Saves on the eye strain as well, right? I imagine, rather than having to really pinpoint your focus on just like segments.
Right. So we have, at the moment, we have this file. And so within that file, you'll see here on the drop down, the little drop down, that we only have a few properties to this entire file. But what we want to do is double click in it. And inside, we're going to find all of our layers with the names that we chose in Photoshop.
Nice.
And then here we can go a step further and start deciding maybe in the hopes of organization, right? We talked about like just being organized, and I think a lot of us tend to actually enjoy this part. So we would label this by just right clicking, and you can see there, then it starts to label the entire timeline also. So that's kind of handy, because then one of the things that could suck is like you're so focused on the timeline that I did that one again. You're so focused on the timeline that you might add an effect to the wrong file.
Yeah, you become the timeline because you're just forever like sucked into the timeline vortex, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of cool to be able to have these little helpers to be able to just see everything.
I think as well, that's a nice point that you mentioned, because it's all about trying to make the workflow so much more streamlined. I mean, that's the beauty, especially with I've noticed as well as, you know, as a designer with the Adobe updates. There's so many little things that there to just make your life a lot easier. And again, it's more, and I've been kind of stuck in my ways where you might have an idea of how things operate and work, but actually when you watch maybe a creative challenge, or you watch one of the Adobe tutorials, or even just something online, you can find much more quicker ways of doing it. And just, I think, taking that time out to just really get acquainted, it will make your life so much easier. So that's probably a nice way to kind of plug, but definitely check out a lot of the Adobe live streams even after this, because there's so many different snippets of things you can do with your programs that you work with, just to make your life easier. So yeah, definitely check them out. I'm liking that color code as well. It's like a rainbow system. It's looking good, Sin.
It's like a really muddy rainbow, but yes. Okay, so I think we're going to get started on our background. So one of the first things that I wanted to do is create this element where it feels like the universe is moving or scaling or going upwards or downwards in whichever way. I think I'll probably go downwards. So I'm just going to make it look like it's moving, going down. So when it comes to animation, consider this area of the timeline your sort of like traveling in time area. So you're going to be traveling from point A to point B. Oftentimes you can get more complex and have different animations in between. But just to simplify it, we're going to be doing a lot of point A to point B things here. So I'm going to be considering, okay, what is my point A? Where do I want this file to be at first? And where do I want it to finalize? And After Effects will figure out the in-between. So we're going to do that with our background. So I have something else back here I can get rid of. I think it's the little house. Yeah. We didn't end up using that, so I can get rid of that. So I'm going to be using one of the properties here, which defaults. You'll see that this property transform shows up in all of the different elements that we have here. So transform is our default. So already I can do several different effects to this file. I can change the position, I can scale it if I want to, I can make it go up and down if I want to, I can rotate it within an anchor point. I can change the opacity like we saw in Photoshop, right? Like just lowering the opacity and allowing that opacity to reveal within a time, within the timeline. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to be changing, I'm going to say the position because we're moving it from up down, right? So let's see. Let's get out of this preview with that little squiggly line just to see how it looks. So now that little stopwatch is going to be really important. That's going to tell After Effects we're ready to create an effect, and this is the start of my timeline. So I'm gonna press, I usually like to click that right where I want it to start or right where I want it to end. So in this case, I want it to start right about here because I'm gonna go down. So I'm gonna try to utilize as much of the file as I can, and that's about where it ends. So I'm gonna start there, and now I'm ready to click that stopwatch, okay? And then you'll see there, it creates, and we can use this to zoom in a little bit. Oh, it doesn't zoom in as much, but you can see there beneath the playhead, you can see there is a little anchor. What is that called? A little diamond. I don't know, I forgot the name. But yeah, so that is letting us know, okay, it listened to us. Now I have a point, point A. Now we have to determine our point B. So my point B in this case, I have a timeline that is about 30 seconds. I can choose a 30-second delay of point A to point B. If I want to make it faster, I might get a little bit closer and say within 4 seconds, I want that point B to be completed. In this case, I want that feeling to be kind of eerie because it's moving and the stars are sort of changing. I mean, they don't often change fast unless you're doing a time lapse, which could be what you're after. So in my case, I'm going to do it fairly slow. So I'm going to extend it as far as I can. Maybe the 30 seconds will be just fine. And then I'll get out of this preview and start to bring it down all the way to the other edge. Okay, so then what we see here that happens as soon as I do that, I get another anchor, another little diamond here. It's killing me that I don't remember the name of it, but yes,
I feel like I want to, anyone who knows the sort of correct term, please by all means get in it.
It's funny, right? Like you have to think about the terminology, but yeah, so we get another one of these guys and it just populates because we move that file. We move the position of that file. So it already knows that you don't have to click that stopwatch again. I think in the very beginning, I used to click the stopwatch again because I thought, okay, well, I did it again, so I should let it know that I did it. But actually that would just turn it off. So we don't want to click the stopwatch again. This little diamond will populate as soon as you move it. Granted, you can also use these little numbers here, just kind of pull the lever and find where it would fit best. So if that helps you kind of stay more kind of put, I feel like sometimes I like moving the files around, but sometimes the files can be a bit complex. So it is really helpful to do it directly from here. So now when we want to see that, we're going to allow this to render and see how it moves. I'm going to go in here, hit that squiggly. So I have a preview, even for myself, even if it's not for live stream, having that ability to say, okay, I'm going to sit back and then let that move. It already kind of has that, right? It's a nice sense. Now, if that is too slow and say I want to change the speed of it, I definitely could just pull in that little diamond a little bit closer and say I want it to happen here. I mean, I'm going to show you an example of what happens if it is fast.
So just on that, so touching about the diamond, actually, a question from PJ, which should be best for you to answer because we're in the process of it. So PJ's asked, is the diamond a stop point? And then obviously what I just said, diamond is a keyframe. But obviously you just explained about how you do it. But thank you, Oliver. You saved us by giving us direct.
It says like in my frontal lobe. Yeah.
Yes, there we go. Hopefully
what was the question?
So PJ was asking, is the diamond a stop point? So obviously you use them for stop and start.
It's more like a marking point. So you're defining that point in the time and what is going to happen to your layer, to your file, to your shapes. You're determining whether at this point I need you to behave this way. Whether that's, hey, I need you to get scale higher. I need you to change positions. It's like you're kind of like leading an orchestra, so to speak. It's like, go over there once this time happens, right? In 5 seconds, I need you to do that. So it's more like that. So yes, it's a keyframe. And what we're gonna do to this keyframe to sort of ease the transition is we're going to right click it. And we have this option here, keyframe assistant, and we're able to easy ease so that the transition is happening a little bit less like scratching, just like it has this default use of easy ease. You can do easy in, easy out. You can go a little bit further and customize it yourself. For example, if I click easy ease, my keyframe changes a bit. I wish I had a way to really zoom in here, but my keyframe changes a bit and you'll see what that looks like. That's what happens there. That's what easy ease looks like. So it starts this way and then it goes up. If I was to do, say, for example, let's undo that. And I was to do an easy out on this keyframe and an easy in on this keyframe, and I go to my graph, that's like that exact graph, right? If I do it the other way, then it will be easy out on the end and easy in on the beginning. And so that would change the velocity at which it starts, and then it would then shift onto something different towards the end. So this part gets a little bit more complex. I mean, there are folks out there, animators, that truly like take full advantage of this, where it gets like It just looks so cool. And then there's a lot of little tools here to play with. But at the moment, what's really cool about most of the softwares in the Adobe Creative Suite is that you do have a starting point, so a preset of sorts. So just being able to press easy ease, you know that you're going to have a pretty smooth transition as opposed to just like going in there and having to do that from the start. You have at least something to select from.
Well, that's a nice point. I think it, like, you kind of touched on what we said at the very beginning, where it can seem quite daunting. Be like, you've got those basics that just makes it, you know, almost like a foundation just to work from. And then as you kind of get, you know, more confident in the program, you start to do more, you know, intricate, you know, motion graphics and doing things on top. So and that's definitely the key, you know, sort of starting and actually making that initial start to actually get, you know, get the process going. It's quite funny, Sin, now we mentioned, because we couldn't find the name of what that diamond was, and now we know it's keyframe. I just see keyframe popping up now on the chat. There's a few keyframes, so now
there's a few keyframes.
We'll know what that is now.
That was a trivia question.
That was, and you all passed. Well, we actually,
you know, when I go to trivia, do you ever go to trivia events? But like, when I do any trivia, I always tell that I'm always telling my fiance, like, I don't really enjoy trivia because it's pop culture questions that I tend to not mostly ignore.
Design questions, if they were design,
but if it was design questions, you know, I feel like, wouldn't that be fun?
That would be cool. I know we do, like on Adobe Live, we have like almost like Voodoo Val challenges and things like that with, you know, kind of like game show things, which it's almost like, do you remember Hangman, where you draw and then you, we have kind of similar, I'm saying it completely wrong, but I know we have similar things like that. But in terms of like a trivia quiz, and that's why I don't know about it, that will be a cool thing to do. We should start one up soon. And
that'd be cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'll be down for that. Keyframe has to be one of the questions though, obviously, just in case.
Keyframe. So I'm going to move on to the light layer. So I'm playing around with this light layer and just sort of wondering, or what can I do with it? Should it sort of orbit? Can it move from point A to point B in this direction? Maybe something I can do with it I think could be interesting is hiding and revealing it with opacity, but also scaling it up at the same time, right? Could be an interesting way to bring attention to the light. So something to note is that you don't always have to do a singular effect to your files. You can really stack up different effects. So in this case, I'm going to scale it up, but I'm also going to change the opacity so that as it's scaling up, it's also revealing itself. So let me show you how I'm going to do that.
Nice.
So let's start here. We want to have a starting point. Let's say it starts at this scale, right? Okay, and then I have this file here. It's my pink file. And again, I have my transform in here. And from here, I'm going to select scale. And I'm also going to select simultaneously opacity. And that's going to happen right from the start. I think that's cool. I can start maybe I can start the light maybe at 2 seconds to give it a little bit of room. Let's do that. So we can choose to have our point A right at 2 seconds instead of at 0. So I'm going to press that scale, and I'm also going to press the opacity. And I know that point A, I actually don't want to see the light yet. So I'm going to hit that 0. And we have already determined that scale. We made it fairly small. And so after this, we're going to select our point B, or our final point. And I think I want that to happen fairly quickly, because I don't want it to be the entirety of the duration of my clip. So I'm going to pull it maybe from here to about maybe 6 seconds. Let's see how fast that happens. And I'm going to increase the opacity to 100 at this point. That would be my final result. And then here, I want some visibility of my preview so that I can see what it would look like when I increase. I'm going to hold shift there so it keeps the proportion. When I increase it simultaneously, because the anchor point is down here in the center, it kind of sends it up to that corner, which is in fact pretty cool. So I like it that way. I'm going to keep that. And you can see down here, if you had your eyes kind of in the playhead, you see how it populates. You see that? And it populates that new keyframe. Right? So cool. No need to do it yourself. However, if you wanted to do it directly from this panel, we can increase the scale like that. And I think I wanted to end it right about that corner there. And I'm going to, again, select all the keyframes and right click, easy ease. And that's just going to smoothen that effect. It's all about the attention to detail that renders kind of shows up. So let's see.
I think that's quite cool where you kind of do like, you're doing little bits and then it's almost like do it, test it, and you have to keep doing it just until you're in a comfortable place where because that's the beauty of it, right? Where you're kind of, it's almost try and error until you kind of get it right. So yeah, it's really cool. It's cool to see that sort of process.
Yeah, it is trial and error, and maybe just this is kind of the area where you can come in if you're the kind of person that likes a plan. You can come in with a plan. Like for example, at this point I know what I'm going to do. I did it before. The first time it was really a question of maybe I can do this because I got inspired in Photoshop, seeing some of the things that could be possible. So I'm going to move on to, then I think I had, this is an interesting one. So we talked a little bit about the fire here that we have in the middle. We talked a little bit about how you can resort to finding some of those assets on Adobe Stock if you don't have something of your own, to be able to find things like images or video clips, I think could be really helpful. So I'm just gonna put this here so you can see what I mean. So yesterday we experimented with maybe using some of these images with the black background and using blend modes to be able to bring back that fire that happened to be really windy, and I had it as a long exposure. So of course the fire didn't come out exactly sharp because it was moving all over the place. So I can do some post compositing and use the help of stock photography to find those elements and reintroduce them into my image. In this case, I have this fire video already in place. So I'm just going to import that here. And remember, this is our resource panel. So if I have any luck here with importing my stuff, let me see, should be this one here. So I'm gonna just bring in this case, an MP4. So already After Effects recognizes it. It knows it's a video format. It doesn't ask me any further questions as opposed to the first time when we imported the PSC. So I have this extra file here and I can bring it into my timeline. And I'm just gonna bring it in at the bottom, but actually I want it at the very top so it's visible. And it shows up as the regular size. I can go in here and scale it, right? Instead of 100%, I can scale it down. And this was actually footage that I recorded in my last camping session, not in Pace Bend, in Florida, actually. So I camped quite a bit. So
I'm so jealous. I'd love to do camping, but that's a whole different. I've never done it before, but anyway, that's another conversation.
Oh, really?
So
it's a lot of fun.
Camping. Okay, cool.
So at first it tests your inner city heart, you know.
That's
and
where
then
we
eventually
differ then, because
yeah.
So it's like I need Wi-Fi. I'm that kind of Gen Z. Anyway.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. And so it's a great time to use your equipment and just photograph. There's like no need to share, but then you can just collect and be observant and things like that. So I have this footage here from that. I wanted to scale it. I just wanted to note that in this case, I'm not animating anything. I didn't press that little stopwatch. So my scaling isn't necessarily being animated throughout. You can see there's no keyframe whatsoever. That was just me redetermining the size of this file. So this can come in handy for things like that too, without having to start animating. So I'm going to scale it down to about that area. The reason why this is a good candidate for compositing for me is it has mostly black areas, and I know that using blend modes I'm able to sort of hide those elements, that area out, and isolate the fire. I do have a little bit of red here, but we're going to kind of crop that out, and I think we're going to use a mask to do that actually. So I'm going to go up here with the rectangle tool, but I'm going to hold it enough to be able to see the remaining shapes, and then you can see the ellipse tool in there. And with our file selected, I'm just going to create a sort of oval here to be able to hide those other areas. And you can see how masks work in this case. It's still the same thing. It even shows us a similar icon as the one that we see in Photoshop. So a lot of these things just translate over from program to program. You might use them in a different way, right? The function might be slightly different, but I think if you just think the premise is to hide and reveal, you're good. So I'm going to keep that this way, and I think I'll probably be able to feather this out, right? So I'm gonna go, you can see I have now there you go. I have now a little mask property here. So I'm gonna go in there and then select the feathering and increase the feathering so that I can have kind of a smoother edge.
And just whilst you're doing that, I mean, again, for any sort of, any questions that you guys might have, that especially because obviously we're going for it fairly quickly, but I guess there's always little terms or tools that we might say and don't really explain it because it's just almost like by default, we just do it as designers. But if there's anything you want to explain a bit more, definitely get it in the chat. And I'm sure we're happy to explain it through. And again, just as a nice friendly reminder, if you're watching on YouTube, amazing, but definitely do it via Behance, because that way we can, get those questions in.
Definitely. I think if you're here already, you're getting the best part of live streams, which is you get to interact with us. You're welcome to watch any replays, but definitely, this is the fun part. I feel like
you're in a good space. You're in safe hands. You're in safe hands, and you're in a very, very good space. And actually, just on that, that's probably quite a nice sort of anchor point to kind of mention. So about half hour until we actually do our artist spotlight, which is insane how time's kind of gone by. So definitely stay tuned because at past we're going to do Artist Spotlight. And again, for anyone who's very much new to Adobe Live and don't know what Artist Spotlight is, just as a nice reminder, again, it's a chance for us to pay a bit of homage and just basically celebrate a creator from the community. So we've got a good one. We won't say who because we're going to keep the surprise, but stay tuned. And like we said, we're going to share in about 30 minutes or so. So stick around.
So I'm going to blend this in so that we continue the compositing practice that we're doing here, just creating layers and layers to be able to composite. What I really love about this specifically is that it does a sort of a cinematograph of sorts. We're going to have an element, everything seems very static, but then there's some elements that are moving. So it kind of gives it a little bit of a glimpse of like surprise, like, whoa, that's moving.
Nice.
So it's really cool to be able to, in this case, layer not just photography, but now a little bit of video too. So I'm going to use the blending modes, and we talked about how using this little section here deals with anything that is on the darker areas, and we do have darker areas here that we want to be able to blend. So if we use lighten, screen, any of these, it's going to affect that. And I'm going to use screen in this case, and you can see how it's already just like seamless, right?
Perfect.
So as I play it, you can see the fire.
Looking good.
So I'm gonna just move it a little bit more into the center to give it a little bit more visibility, increase that mask a bit so I get to see more of it. And I think I have an audio here that I don't know if you guys hear, but I'm gonna just...
So that sort of sound of fire, I mean, that's like it's one of those sounds where it's like the sound of rain, isn't it? Where it's just very therapeutic sometimes just to kind of
the fire sound. Yeah. I love that.
Is there sound with this?
A little crackle.
Yeah, is there sound of this particular clip, do you know? Or is it just is it a silent video clip with the flame?
So it's good to know that if you feel like, I know when it comes to things like motion, I mean, under the library of motion, Premiere, After Effects, or even Rush. I mean, Rush is fairly good with this, but I know that sometimes it may feel like everything's going a lot slower. It might be your actual system, or it might be the simple answer is that it's rendering at the moment. So don't lose like, faith in it. Like at first it will always render in order to kind of then show you that preview. So that's why it kind of takes a little bit at a time. Nice. And it's like a funny joke that I have here with my fiance too. It's like, it's rendering, because it takes a little while. So
I feel like there's so many.
When it's rendering.
Yeah. There's actually it's funny you say that because and this is no word of a lie. Again, my partner and I, we were having breakfast this morning, and we saw one of those clips where it's like a child, and it's like the caption was like when Adobe is rendering, and it's like when there's a rise where it's like a theme park, and it's like I won't do the noise, but it's almost like your machine's gonna take off when it takes so long for the render. I'm sure a few designers can understand that.
Sometimes I joke like I'm maybe like somewhere in the kitchen, and I'm like, no, I'm working right now because my file's rendering, so.
Nice, so it counts as too. See, designer jokes, if we can't have that in Adobe Live, then we're not in a good place.
Yeah.
We can always have design jokes.
There's always that. So let me see how that looks. Let's go back a little bit here. And you can also determine the area that you want to render. So it doesn't have to render the entirety of your file. And this is kind of more to zoom in and zoom out into all, because eventually into all the keyframes, because eventually you might have like a bulk of them. And so this is a cool way to zoom in or zoom out. And you'll see that it also correlates to how this gets moved, right? So those two are kind of the zooming in, not to confuse it for the area which you want to export or the area which you want to render. So I'll tell it to just render this area so that it doesn't go all the way down. And then I'm going to kind of preview it here for you guys so that you can see it. And so you can see the fire there moving.
Even the colors, like I feel like we haven't given much attention and like homage to even the color palette. I know obviously you're from photography, but it's just a beautiful palette that you've got going, with all the shapes and the textures with everything that you've got. It's really, really nice.
Yeah, the color's really pretty. It's like purple. I think I wouldn't say that was absolutely like planned, but what helps guide me is just knowing that if you have something that's a little bit warm and something that's a little bit on the cooler side, kind of contrasting each other, there's always going to, that role is always going to play off really well, no matter what the colors are, no matter what the hues are. If you're playing on only warm colors, just understand that you're doing that kind of monochromatic style and so on, But if something seems off, just say, well, maybe it's because I don't have any contrast. Maybe I could introduce like a cool color, something that's the opposite. Yeah,
what's interesting about that?
Think of it that way.
I was gonna say, sometimes I always find, this can be translated, I guess, across even print as well, and digital. But when you have colors where, I always think traditionally you might have a nice color palette that might mirror up or might marry up quite well. But the ideas of colors that clash, sometimes that's quite a modern thing in terms of what we see now, where it's just, something that might not look, or you would assume that would work well, actually works really, really well. And I think it's so subjective when it comes to color, but I think it's one of those ones where you can just, especially with younger brands targeting maybe younger audience, where you might have, I don't know, an illuminous yellow green married up with, a black or, any other colors like that. It's nice to clash, I think, sometimes as well. It's not so regimented.
Yeah, that's like an analogous color palette is always like kind of the opposite extreme of the color wheel. I sometimes see that being worn quite often in Miami because it's like that. I don't know. We're very.
You guys are cool.
Yeah, very cool. No, we're just cool. I wouldn't say I'm that color palette, but it's just the vibrancy of this city. I think that kind of just inspires people to dress really vibrant too. in so many respects. And then obviously the Latin influence, that kind of like energy. So yeah, I see that often here. And I love being able to capture it.
Nice. Just on that very quickly, before we can go a bit more into depth of this, for anyone who's got any questions, especially, we're just touching on color and, even in your community or where you live, do you still see there's a color trend, whether it's in fashion, print, digital? It'd be cool to know your perspectives on how you sort of see color going through, and again, get those questions in the chat, and we'd love to know it.
So I think in this one, I'm going to rotate the sphere, and I'm going to start it somewhere here. 4 seconds. Yeah. So again, point A and point B. So I think first I'm just going to play around with this and see what it would look like when I rotate it, right? So I might want to be able to, let's see, rotate, kind of establish my anchor point here and see what it looks like. Try to rotate it in place. That can be kind of cool to just like place it, have it rotate in the same area, and have then you can just apply the same effect to all the different spheres. So I might want to establish how it rotates. Like I'm going to put it here so you can have that visibility. So I might want to establish a rotation. So I'm going to do, maybe it starts somewhere here, and I'm going to end it fairly close, and then just change it almost to like 180, or just switch it up so it looks a little bit different. And then you can just see how that rotates. And maybe that seems a little bit too fast and less natural, or you can just kind of extend that and it feels a bit more natural, that it's just moving in place. And then so something like this, you can then go ahead and apply it. I'm going to ease that too. Something like this, you can just copy, Control C or Command C, and then place it onto other files, like for example, this one. And so I can just hit, not moving my timeline, my playhead, I can place it in there too. So I'm gonna hit the letter U there so I can see it. And I'm just gonna place it. Oops, I think I did that a little bit off. Let's see. Let me undo that.
It's very cool to sort of see, even from yesterday's, stream right up until now. It's that process that we've kind of joined already. It's been really cool. I'm sure people in the chat will agree as well. But it's nice to sort of see your methodology, Sin, and how you've kind of gathered your assets, played around with them, and then now take them into different platform and using that.
Yeah, I'm glad it's helpful. It's kind of one of those things that really cool. It took me a little bit to sort of decipher. And then I realized that there's some hiccups that happen along the way that, maybe some people have had the same experience with, that I think that could just be a matter of kind of understanding or compartmental, like understanding the space, the landscape, and then just seeing it from a different like viewpoint, like, hey, it's just a timeline. It's just a way to determine one point to another point. And if I want to go more complex than that, then, I'll give myself some time of just gaining that experience to be able to develop that. But if you just start with that kind of foundation of like, okay, then I've done that one, I've done that little bit, that's really helpful. I'm going to, I wanted to animate the fonts, which is, it's kind of like an intro title, so to speak. So I'm gonna go in here and I think we're gonna use that opacity element to like reveal and hide. But I also want to go into my effects panel, and I think I wanted to do that. Probably, yeah. I'm gonna search for blur. And under blur and sharpen, we're gonna find Gaussian blur, right? And so this is right here on the right hand side is we have a lot of really cool effects and presets that you can play with by just quite simply dragging and dropping into that file. So I'm really hoping that's that's the text right there. And you can tell also because the little edges are yellow. So that helps me to kind of identify it.
So soon, are we not going to get any Star Wars effects? I remember yesterday we spoke about maybe if it was like, you know, the sort of font kind of goes up at an angle. Are we?
I don't think so. I left that font behind.
That's for another Adobe live stream.
That might be something you can experiment with. Like that was actually like
nice.
A nice font though. I need to find a new way to showcase it.
Font selection.
So I want to be able to blur this. I think I already placed the blur, right? Yes, here it is. So you'll be able to see that it shows up on your effects, on your file as effects. And now I have my Gaussian blur in here. So I can determine the blurriness, the amount of blur that I want. I can create a timestamp also of whether I want that to change from point A to point B, or if as a whole, I want to keep it blurry, right? So I definitely want to change that. I want to be able to have, say, when it starts, when it showcases, I want it to showcase as fixed, right? So I want it to not be blurry. And then once it moves along, I want it to get just a little bit blurry. And so I get to see that kind of really cool, the X-Files kind of vibe. And then it goes back to throwback. And then it goes back to 0. And simultaneously, I'm gonna layer that effect with the transform effects are basically our foundation effects that we'll always have. And I'll include an opacity here where it starts at 0, a little bit behind, maybe somewhere here, it's still at 0. A little bit behind. Starts at 0, and then it moves on. By the time it reveals it moves on to 100.
So I've got a question to ask. I'm quite curious about, so when you, and usually I do, you know, hosting as well, I'm always curious to know about different creators and, you know, what is the thing that they find when they're working that they take not inspiration from, but do they work maybe with music? Or you have to work in silence? Like what's that allows you to really be sort of honed in on focus? Or say, for example, you're doing what you're doing now, but, you know, behind closed doors, no Adobe live stream, what would you have music on, or what's your kind of thing to get you in a real
you know, sometimes I do play music. I go I try to find some music that might be relevant to this. So if I know, hey, I probably want something cinematic, or maybe I want something kind of playful, then I'll start playing that whole playlist. And it's a bit of multitasking because sometimes there's like a weird song that I just cannot play the whole way through. And then sometimes it kind of like, it stands in as like a soundtrack for me to relax. And it also, I'm trying to find a song. So as I'm doing the work, it just hits. It's like, wait, that is the one, because you're doing the work simultaneously.
Sure.
So it's kind of a cool way to feel like the inspiration. I know a lot of folks, like, you know, they'll sort of listen to them to songs while they're in their car, but for me, like being able to see the song, the artwork as the song is playing is really helpful. Otherwise I'll just resort to playing the Beatles or something chill and enjoy my workflow.
By the way, I can totally see the work you're doing, like a Hans Zimmer, if you know that Hans Zimmer soundtrack on top, almost like Interstellar kind of music, which I think we touched on a bit yesterday, but that would be like the perfect, well, I would assume perfect soundtrack, where it's just kind of, there's no lyrics, it's just instrumental. Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite film, but it's just, I can see.
Really? Nice.
Yeah, with a design like this, it kind of has, it almost needs something, you know, like that kind of nice epic music on top, because it just kind of encompasses the whole, you know, look and feel.
It's nice to be able to have like a good sense of like, well, would it be fitting, you know, there's music out there that's really, really popular, and it's fairly dramatic, and it's fairly like techno, I want to say, like just so much. And it's sometimes you bring it down to the bare bones and you realize maybe all I need is one of the instruments. Maybe I don't
That's a
really
very
need
good point.
the entire complex. Yeah, maybe what I like about the song has nothing to do with that part or the vocals. Maybe the vocals is what I like.
It's a
So
strong
I
triangle, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's a nice, a strong triangle.
That was a bad joke. Yeah,
Just
pretty
got
much.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like it's nice kind of to dissect that and maybe find in the same way that you approach your work, and like maybe you're very minimal sort of designer, maybe that's your energy and music choices too.
I think we got Vanessa who said it's quite, again, it's really lovely to sort of hear other creatives and what's your jam, how do you operate, how do you work. And Vanessa said, I like listening to classical music as I work. It helps tune out everything else. I find music with lyrics sometimes make me lose focus on my work, which I totally agree as well. You might just end up singing away and realize you haven't actually been using your mouse or your tablet for a while because you've just been fixated on the lyrics.
You're the sing-along kind.
I'm like the tapping of the hand kind
now
of
we
guy.
know.
I'm realizing the tapping of the hand is actually the tapping of the mouse hands. That means I'm not actually doing any work because I'm tapping on the table instead of tapping on the mouse.
Oh, really? Do you play an instrument?
Ooh, put me on the spot now, Sin. I used to when I was a kid. I used to play the drums when I was a kid. And I've got a guitar. I say that as if I'm great at it. I've got an acoustic guitar in the attic. I got it on my birthday, and I've tried to watch a few tutorials and play, but not enough to say I'm like Kurt Cobain. Do you play anything?
That's the goal right there, Kurt Cobain.
Set a standard time. Do you play instruments?
That's not a high standard at all.
Is it? Destroy my dreams soon. Why don't you?
Yeah.
What's your? Do you play the instruments, or what's your?
I don't, but I definitely have that energy to try it too. I have a guitar, ukulele. I'm much better at the ukulele than I am at the guitar for some reason. But I do have, that dream hangs in a really beautiful spot, and it looks really beautiful in my house, but definitely not as easy as you would think, especially like a Spanish guitar. It's just like when you go on YouTube and you see these people who are so talented and so incredibly gifted. Yeah.
I might add, I'm actually quite good at Guitar Hero, which I know has got absolutely nothing to do with it, but I'm pretty sharp on guitar. But anyway, without getting too off piece, could be totally good. Let's go back into After Effects. Yeah. But, it's a great game.
Yeah, I mean, that's so funny. I sometimes say that too. Guitar Hero counts. I'm just rotating them in opposite directions. So the same thing we did earlier, but instead I'm going to rotate them in opposite directions. So they kind of it starts to do sort of an ensemble. I think that's the direction I went to. Yes. So it starts to kind of do a bit of an ensemble with all the different ones. And I'm just going to do this in this direction here. And this one's going right, and at a different speed also, that can kind of help. Because I think at the end, it starts to just be about a little bit of TLC, where you just start to observe wait, how does that work? Maybe, especially if we're talking about music, when you introduce music, then you start to pay attention about to the little moments that you want to cue in a certain element. That could be even extra shocking. Should you introduce the fonts at the crescendo of the song, or when it's silent?
Point. Yeah, right? That's a very good point. It almost touches on, I mean, there is a similarity, but when you mentioned going to the cinema and you see the movie posters, I'm always quite fixated on adverts that are especially designed for the cinema, for the screen kind of, size and resolution. And I kind of feel like when it's, again, attention to detail, whether, like you said, fonts might come up at certain times of the songs, or, things appear in sort of focus. I think there's such a cool art to knowing when to kind of, put these things in play, whether it's advertisements or digital print. I think but more so obviously digital, I think is really, really cool.
Yeah, I love digital design. Actually, as of late, I've been really intrigued too. I got a recent order for prints, and it was maddening because I was just shocked how many orders came through.
Did you go wild?
I was like, was this a mistake? Because it was from a single person. and it was a giant order to be fulfilled. And I just, first of all, I was really grateful for the support, but I was also a bit like, it was a bit daunting because you want to be able to still accomplish the same type of output on every single one, right? Like I just didn't want one to kind of just be slightly different, like in being able to replicate color, especially when it comes to print or anything that's outside of the digital medium, is such an experiment in itself, right? Because it's so different. This is backlit and print is absolutely not. Very true. There's beauty in that too, because you can use different substrates, different paper. I really
we could totally geek out in that, and that's because like print is something. I mean, that's kind of definitely my sort of sector in editorial, but yeah, I mean, it's there's a lot of, and again, it's always good to know what people's thoughts are. But whether you're in Team Camp Print, Team Camp Digital, but there's a lot of crossovers. That's the beauty of our industry, right? Of what we do, and I think it's especially with print as well, where how things react on different print stock, whether it sinks into the paper and the actual the GSM of it, the paper weight. I mean, there's so much different almost like hoops you have to kind of go through to kind of make sure that you get the right color on the right stock. But again, that's the time willing, that's the fun part of any project. But as I say, just on that, we're about sort of 9 minutes. I mean, that's very precise. 9 minutes to be exact, until we get into our artist spotlight. So I mean, hopefully you guys are still here and you're tuned in. And just on that note as well, again, if you are on the Adobe Behance, you can see on the very, very top in the chat an artist spotlight tab. So definitely get submitting your recommendations for hopefully the next artist spotlight. So stay tuned. Next 9 minutes or so, we're going to jump in and show you our artist spotlight.
Yeah, that's exciting. We were just talking about that yesterday, like being able to not be shy and share your work.
But it's human. I guess it's like it's funny because we're on Adobe Live and there's obviously a lot of people viewing, and I think I always find like us having a conversation now, I almost not forget in a weird way, but it's like it's just two people having a nice conversation. We've got friends kind of joining in, and it's almost like you forget the mass of it all. It's just, I think sometimes when you strip away that elements of it, it's almost like nerves doesn't really come into it because you're kind of having fun with it. But again, it's human to be nervous, right? So, but here obviously we're in a safe space, so for us, any work you share, it's always gonna, we're always happy to. I'm
totally playing with the mask here just to see what's possible. Like you can just masks are so cool.
That's cool. Like a
it's one of my favorite things to play with. It's just always, and at the premise, it's just like hiding and revealing things. Like for example, we can do like if it starts small. Let's say I wanted to do that, so I'm gonna just hit that there, and then go forward actually, and then expand that mask.
Do you know what I got when I saw that? I got totally like a Looney Tunes, that's all folks, kind of,
that's all folks, yeah.
So I've completely diminished now the design, but no, I love the fun
maybe
part.
that's the kind of
that was missing, the Looney Tunes
poster that someone's working on, and then you can use that in that kind of, but it's interesting that you equated like a little bit more of an energetic kind of vibe to that animation. Each animation just sort of has something else to it, and also depending on how long it takes to kind of develop. Like in this case, it's kind of slower.
Yeah, it's the mood. It sets the mood really nicely. I mean, it's space as well. Like you feel like it's not something that's rushed. It's the one, well, many things, but like the one thing where there's no time on it. It takes its time because it can, and it's just like maybe that should be reflected with obviously not having the world's slowest time lapse, but just still in a way where it can just really, take its time to digest the final end product. I think that's totally nice. It's soft and slow.
Do we still have some time?
We've got time, yeah. We've got 6 minutes. I feel like I'm the clock keeper. I mean, I kind of am as the host, but we got 6 minutes. I think we could do quite a bit still in 6 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna do a quick thing here. I'm gonna try to be quick. So one of the things I like creating is like some external elements. Adobe After Effects has a way to be able to create your own shapes here. Like there's no reason for you to necessarily start in Photoshop, except for the reason that I use, which is I love Photoshop and I love experimenting in it. So if I find myself there and then as a second step, I find myself in animation, I'm happy with that. And there's an option to do that too. But if you wanted to create your artwork here, there's ways to use vector shapes, different, bring in different files and create your composition directly here. I'm going to create the shape here. I'm just going to create a little star. Nice. So I'm going to rename it Shooting Star.
And by the way, just to add something as well, so we said obviously 5 minutes, but also even after our artist spotlight, we have a bit of time still afterwards. So I don't want to cut you short. So I'm going to give you much time because again, we want to see it.
Okay.
So I'm not a monster. We still got time for a more.
I was like, okay, how can I do this fast? That could be a nice challenge. So yeah, I think that, so in our original one, we had like a little shooting star, and this one kind of does emulate a little bit of that too. But the easy way of doing that is to be able to use your pen tool. And we got a little bit familiarized with the pen tool on Photoshop. So that's good. We have now a tool that we already know and we have a sense of how it works. So we're able to use the pen tool in the same fashion here. If you want to click and drag elements and create brand new elements, creating the circle being one of the most challenging things, but you're able to do that. And then it populates here on your timeline as a shape, to which you can do the same types of transitions and animations that we did to all the other files. So in this case, I just want to draw a straight line, and I actually have a fill here, but I don't want, I'm gonna like remove that. I think just put 0, at least black is fine. And then my stroke is going to be white. So whatever I draw, it's going to show up as a stroke. Right now it's kind of small, but you can kind of see it there. It's like a white stroke. Okay, so focusing on this one, I'm going to go in here into the contents, and I had 2 shapes at the moment, but I just want my first shape. You should be able to just see shape 1. And I'm going to go into the stroke panel and then go into taper. And we want to taper the start length and the end length. So it starts to sort of emulate that star, like shooting star shape. So we're going to do maybe something like 50 and then do 50 on the end of the stroke also. And here you can, choose to do so many different things. Like if you want to create dashes, if you want to have, the width of your stroke a little bit bigger, things like that can be modified in this stroke section. So you can see that. That's what that looks like there.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's so subtle, but again, it just makes all that little detail, right? Which I absolutely love.
Yeah, and I think after when we come back, I'll animate it, and we'll be able to create that effect of it appearing and disappearing. We'll have the most control one can have over a shooting star in the next few minutes.
I love. You're gonna keep us in suspense now, Sin, until I love that. But again, so. I mean, I feel like we need like a bit of a drum roll, because now I guess we can definitely kind of go into perhaps go into our artist spotlight when you're ready. And then obviously, again, we'll definitely come back in and then refine a bit more. So, I mean, again, a massive welcome. Hopefully you've been from before, but if you have just joined in, again, it's still a good moment because we're very, very excited to share with you today our artist spotlight, who is, and I hope I get this correct, is Adriano Basilio, which I hope I said that correctly, who's a Brazilian.
I think it's Adriano Basilio. Yeah.
You should have announced it much, because I was terrible at it. But the work, I mean, I can definitely appreciate the style. Should we perhaps pick a project each and we can kind of delve into it?
Oh yeah, sure thing.
Yeah. What are you thinking? What are you feeling?
I mean, right away, just seeing it as from like a bird's eye, I think it's really interesting to see like sort of the common choices, the common decisions, right? Like we start to see a full cohesive project happening. I see a lot of branding. And I think I am interested to see, let's see. Ooh.
I had you down as one straight away when I first, only because of our project we've been working on. But again, I'll pick that one actually next. But
oh, okay.
No,
I love seeing like the use of photography and typography, and then a little bit of that surrealism play into like into a sort of poster design. And I think that if you think about it from that perspective of, hey, can I just make something that doesn't really exist? You start to create really neat stuff. And I think this has like a little bit of texture on it too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I get that kind of vibe. Like, I feel like you hit the nail on the head there, where it's almost like you're stepping into the world that they just created, right? And they're flipping things on its side, they're rotating, and it's just, I mean, for me, that is awesome. Especially that one, actually. I'm getting very much cinematic Tenet kind of, if you know Tenet, but that kind of multi-universe style where it's flipped on its side, which is really, and I like the font as well, actually, the choice of font.
And I imagine this also required a bit of compositing too, because it doesn't look like there would be a place necessarily that somebody can step over the edge here. Maybe this is a secondary image from the city image, and that is a really beautiful use of imagination. I love this. And I also love that the act of just flipping it is such a simple use, but it just sort of brings you into this other world. I think that's a bit understated, like when you just flip an image and it turns into something else.
It's that sense of like almost like orientation, where it's, you know, we just know things are not meant to be that way, but actually when you see it, you're like, oh, okay, your whole mind has a completely, and this is not a bit of a pun, but a completely flipped way of how you would envision that. Even there, where you can see the sort of shading of the sky, and it kind of meets up with the shading on the top half of the sky, and it kind of meets in that middle. I mean, that is really, really cool.
I also like the use of the fonts, being able to say the word proclamando. I imagine that this is kind of, well, this is Portuguese, so it has a double O. This use of the double O aligning with the O of Reino is super cool. I like that a lot. I like being able to see a fun use of typography. I think that says a lot about a designer. Typography is just shapes, really, and you can really manage to do quite a bit with them. But if at the end you could still see it and it's still legible, then you really have done a twofold, right? You've created this new form, but there's also still function in it. That's a good example of a good designer. Yeah, let's see here.
And that's a good point you touched on as well. Like alignment is those kind of, we kind of mentioned a little bit before yesterday, where, you know, with design you can have fun, there's no rules, but actually there's certain things that does have underlining rules, and, you know, things like alignment and how things would sit. I think that's great.
This is cool. Actually, I like this.
That's the project I thought you were going to pick at the very beginning. I saw it. I
missed it when I first saw it.
I had money on that one, Sid. I thought you were going to go for that. This is cool. I looked at this.
So this is really beautiful, and I love that this popped up for us because this is a wonderful example of utilizing different images. A lot of the lessons that we learned today, even as clearly as, like, you know, using the circle as sort of the main foundation, are translated here. And this is a great example of, it doesn't necessarily have to be my criteria of photos or my criteria of the mood that I'm trying to create with my photos. It could be completely the opposite. Like, this is a lot lighter, and yet you know, being able to crop out this building here, having it bleed a little bit outside of the foundation, the circle, all of those tools. You know, we use a bit of masking. It seems like that was used here too, and some typography. So
I like as well, like this, even like, because I think as you kind of go through, you'll see them, that solid bar where it's almost like a solid gradient, but it just kind of, I mean, it hones in obviously where you got the text as well, which kind of, it kind of feeds you in from imagery to text. But I love that kind of, you know, almost like link between the two, which is really, really nice. Yeah, very neutral colors as well.
Yeah, you can tell there's a lot of love and care because all the alignments are.
But you know what? Even the birds, it's the little. I'm a sucker for when you got like an image which it's the little thing. I'm guilty of that, but I love that. Just little things like that. The birds when they're kind of creeping in, I think is really, really nice.
You're very inspired by those birds next.
I'm. Oh yeah. So again, if that makes no sense to anyone, just before we came on the live stream, I've got a massive tree beside me, so we had the birds sort of cheeping away, which is why we just mentioned birds. Why are you talking about birds for? But one thing I think you mentioned at the beginning of From Chicken Art Spotlight is the way he, all of his imagery, as thumbnails and how he's created it. And even on the backdrop where it's got that kind of cream-like image which has all of the assets on, it's just those kind of details where it just feels more uniformed and together rather than it being separate images every single, they're all different, collages, but that overarching nice color palette of the yellow kind of cream, I think is a really nice, muted color. Works well for every single gradient he's got there. Really,
and
really cool.
I think if we were to start to step into sort of the world of animation, like what would you consider animating here? There's
that's a good point.
Right? There's areas here, like for example, the flower, if maybe it was separated or I see that the images are flipped, it'd be kind of cool to have them rotating, maybe having the hands sort of introduced from the bottom, from the with a mask. Same with the birds here, right? Like maybe they just appear. Opacity can be like a bit. There's so many ways of using it, even though it seems like, it's just opacity, it's no big deal. But if you really introduce elements really slowly, it creates that sense of like just I can't think of a word, but like just like a time is going slow and it's really nicely introduced. And the same way for this, having a sunset involved, introducing that light back in could be a cool transition. Even these elements that are happening here, these horizontal elements could be introduced little by little, right? Either they're scaled horizontally so they appear in that way.
Even there, what you're saying about, because those flowers, they're kind of decorative flowers where it's almost like, this is a bit out there, but almost like flourishing flowers, if that kind of makes sense, where they're kind of coming out from a different angle, and then
that'd be cool, right?
That would be almost like branching off, right? But excuse me, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to do so much.
And of course, the title being introduced in different ways with the gradient. Maybe the title changes colors. So it's a really special place to be in when you can design something like this and then allow your mind to kind of go into the opportunity of introducing a bit of motion, and maybe Adriano gets inspired by us and he tries that out.
There we go.
I'd love to see it if you do. By the way, Adriano's one of the folks who supported my live streams on Behance, and thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate you, and I love being able to see your work. Yeah,
it's good. I'm sure I can see the comments are coming in nice. And actually, there was one one more project I'd love to sort of see that I sort of saw before and show you guys. And I think if you scroll down, we can go on that one if you want.
Okay.
I want to see both now, but no, we can go for that one too. Actually, it's quite similar to the one I was going to pick, but that's cool.
That's a mountain.
Very, very cool. Yeah, that's very, very cool. Again, I'm quite a sucker for those images where you've got almost like multiple images kind of immersed into one, because I feel like it invokes an emotion, depending on obviously what the image is inside. Especially, there was one project where maybe we can go on it next in a minute, but it was almost like where the image is kind of from the forehead and it looks as though that person's either thinking it or whether it's an action or an emotion or something, anger or pain. But yeah, that's a lot you can take from that, I feel, in terms of the imagery that he's used and merged together. Very, very cool.
I don't really know. Obstáculo is obstacle. I don't know what this word means, but humanity.
If you know what the word is, put it in the
and fear and faith.
Nice.
Really cool. I love how being able to interpret a concept that is relating back to like an exact word. You know, you kind of have this almost a challenge, but also sort of like this, oh, I gotta make sure to kind of like make it a little bit like similar, right? And I love this because like in this one, humanity, being able to have like multiple people, that's really cool. And
even
I
like
think
the
my
fonts as
favorite
well,
one's
like
this
the
one
style
here.
of font. Yeah, that one's that's cool. I was gonna say the style of the font as well that he's chosen. It's I mean, it's not too playful, but again, it's not so sharp. It just marries up really, really well, I think, of the imagery.
Yeah.
And
Something to note also, things like this, these graphic elements, it's something that we chatted about on the first day, being able to collect, create a library of assets if you're often on Illustrator, and you can start to see like one of the reasons why I really enjoy this is the multiple uses of different mediums, right? We have photography, we have graphics, we have typography. And obviously clearly a lot of blending modes here. It's so cool to be able to see all of those elements play a role in the final result. And I think having graphics at your reach that maybe are a bit abstract, like don't let those kind of die out in a single project. Like I love keeping them in my library instead, so that I can drop them in wherever I can. Yeah, and I think that kind of reminded me of that.
That's a really good point. And actually, again, for those who've actually joined in for the first time and seen an art spotlight, I mean, this is for us. This is a really cool segment of the Adobe Live space we do, where again we pay a lot of just respect to see how other creatives do their artwork and design. So it is something that you would also like to be part of and to maybe get involved. Above the tab in the Behance, you can click on the Artist Spotlight and you can submit your recommendations for the next one. But Sin, as promised, because I didn't want you to miss out on your shooting star and your other bit. Actually, this was the project. Actually, now you've distracted me now, because that was the project I really liked. Maybe we can have a quick look at this and then we'll jump back into your world. But this was it. Yeah, no, you caught me like a child of a shiny toy. You caught me off guard there. But no, I love the black and white and on the contrast of color.
The thunder, the lightning.
That's very, very cool. That one.
Yeah, this is cool. And so in this one, for example, as you see, and I try to dissect the possible workflow. I see the use of opacity, and then I just think that's like such a simple thing, but when you in terms of the technique, but then when you have this really cool idea, like the idea is what can really take it that much further, right? You're able to create this fairly easily with the technique, but if you don't have the idea, it's just it's much harder
difficult
that
to
way.
Execute. Definitely.
Yeah, so being able to experiment and just give yourself that challenge, and like someone else mentioned, just play around, right? And with no specific objective can allow you to kind of like practice or exercise the kind of mindset where you can develop different ideas consistently.
Definitely, yeah. Well, Adriana, I mean, this has been an amazing artist spotlight. Very, very talented. Creative. So yeah, by all means, you can see on Behance there, give them a follow, share some love, send some emojis. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. And again, if you're interested, do some artist spotlights for us in the future, submit, and then we hopefully see you on our next artist spotlight. But Sin, let's jump back into your shooting star world just before we do a nice little wrap up.
Shooting star world.
I just made that up on the spot there. I don't know how that came from. But yeah.
Okay, so let's see. So if you're just joining us, we were just creating a shape here to create a sense of a shooting star. We used our pen tool within After Effects, and we just added a stroke, and we tapered our stroke so that it starts to kind of emulate that shooting star look. So I think now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a effect. So our effects rest here on the right-hand side. And if you can't find it, definitely go into Windows, and you can see here mine has a checkbox because it's visible, but maybe that's what's going on with yours. You can find it here and just select effects and presets. So I'm going to go in here and look for glow, so we can give a little bit of glow to our shooting star, and we can do a few things. We can drag it directly on top of the file, and you can see there how there's different options. Or we can drag it into the timeline within our file. You can see it being highlighted. I'm going to do it directly on the file. And you can see there's a little bit of glow that's already happening there. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. And you can see there's like just a tad bit of glow that's going to give us more of less of just a vector shape, and starts to look like a star. And so we're going to modify that a little bit. Here you can find it here, effects, glow. And then in this left section, we're able to have not our effects, not to be confused for effects. This is the controls for the effects. So effect controls. And in here, you can determine how much glow we want to create, how much intensity in that glow, how much threshold, the radius. It's really cool. Like so many different things that can allow you to customize maybe the color of your glow. Maybe you're creating a neon title, right? This could be a cool way to introduce that sort of artificial light into it. And that's just a preset that you can drop in. So I like the way that looks. So I think I'm going to keep it that way. And I'm going to come back here into my shooting star. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is add a trim path so that I can start to kind of showcase that animation of it appearing and then disappearing. So we're going to go into add.
And just a friendly reminder, because I mean, I'm very much fixated on everything, and I'm sure everyone on our chat is, but also I want to make sure that you have enough time to definitely share for anyone who's quite curious to know more about yourself. Could go about 10 minutes or so until the stream is, which is insane how quickly the time has gone.
Yeah,
but I mean,
it's pretty insane.
It's like you want to kind of get everything in that last minute, but obviously in this last 10 minutes, it'd be great to redo like a nice little recap.
This is a nice little wrap of with our shooting star. So I'm gonna go into trim paths, and once I'm in trim paths, the same way we've done before, we create a starting point and an end point. And in this case, I'm gonna be playing with the section of start and end. And in here, once I click that stopwatch, I'm able to say go from 100 to 0 at the end. And then go from 0 to, I think it's 100 to 0. So it's the opposite, right? So we're gonna do 100 in the beginning at the start, and we're just gonna overlap it in time. And you can see how it goes. It opens up, it's rendering now. So it's doing that part, but it starts to then show up and then it hides away. So it's a bit over there in the corner. I'm gonna bring it a little bit to the center here. And that transition was also a little bit more glitchy than I like. So I'm going to right click it and press easy ease. And if you find yourself doing this constantly, shortcuts are your friend. And you can see here on the right hand side, F9 is the shortcut for this.
Nice.
So I'm going to now play it again, and you can see how it opens up and then it just hides away. And then we can just duplicate as many stars as we want, change its location, and then just have this show up at whatever time of your song or your music. And it just kind of creates this really, really cool effect. I'm going to start from beginning here.
So very, very cool.
Yeah. You can see our lights taking effect. You can see the introduction of our title, a little bit of movement in the background. And yeah, this is pretty much ready for you to export and share it on social media as an MP4, and share it also on Behance, the way I have, which you can check out on my Behance profile. So you can see the process. And I love being able to showcase the process as a case study on Behance, because it just shows all the efforts that go into things, right? So yeah, I'm going to jump into that. right?
You beat me. You beat me to it. There we go. You beat me to it.
Reading your mind here.
You are.
Yeah, so if you want to check out more of my work, I'm often active on Behance live streams. Also check out for resources on education. I use Behance live streams, and also I use Skillshare, where I have more long form courses. And if you want to have access to that for a free month, definitely check out my website, where you can find plenty of links for that. I think there's a link provided here on the chat too. Yeah, so I hope to, hear from you again, and continue to share, continue to experiment, and continue to join us on Adobe Lives.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, for again, you've obviously shown us the website. I mean, it's any sort of project, again, we've got maybe 4 minutes or so left, but is there anything that you're kind of maybe currently working on now that you're able to kind of share with, I mean, maybe not on the screen, but even just discussing it, or is it like top secret stuff?
Yeah, actually, this is probably like it's one of my treasures, because it takes a little bit to create a class or a concept. It looks so fab there. But to create a concept, this one revolves around visual language, which is an umbrella concept of just being able to understand how in a day-to-day you often encounter ways to express yourself visually, and you can choose a different medium every time to be able to kind of dissect, like, what is it exactly that I'm expressing, whether via color, compositions, symbolism. I chat a little bit about all of that here, and in this case, I'm looking at it from the perspective of a photographer, but the core of it is being able to understand visual language a little bit more.
That's cool. I mean, it's cool that you've gone. It's I think we touched on it a bit yesterday, but it's really like sweet that you're allowing yourself to get opportunities and content that people can learn from, and to basically sharpen their skills within the craft of what you do. Absolutely. It's a very, very cool thing to do. So I mean, Adobe Live is obviously one part of it, but this is obviously another, which is great.
I'm going to be continuing to put efforts in this space, and right now I'm actually working on a class. It's graphic design for photographers. So that's very personal to me. That has been my journey. A bit flipped. I have a graphic design background and taught myself photography and film. But I think it's really interesting to be in a space to be able to cross over to things that are very similar, actually. You call it layout, and photography, you call it composition, right? More or less the same thing if you get really used to it. So I'm creating a class around that, and I'm just wrapping it up. It's been such a really beautiful effort of conceptualizing and just finding really cool ways to educate. Yeah.
I mean, that's so cool. And again, it's that you almost forget, there isn't a line in the sand where it's one discipline there, one another there, photography, graphic design. It's the crossover, right? Where it's when you start understanding more and more, understanding where you can do a lot more opportunities, right, in terms of work and the sort of stuff that you explore just by having an understanding of how both sides work. That's really cool to know more about that.
Totally. I mean, when you get started, you think, okay, I got to stick to this and master it. But I think one of the best ways that I was able to master a different field was to be able to step out of it for a second and see it from a field that's similar to it, but it's enough that I'm separated, right? So I don't become biased to the process. I'm able to always kind of allow room for something new. And oftentimes that inspiration comes from relatable fields like photography, film, even a bit of interior design, if that's what you're interested in. I mean, the options are endless.
That's amazing. And I know for a fact, well, I've seen obviously over the period of yesterday and today, the comments have been nothing but positive since. So it's been really, really cool to sort of see the work. And I mean, just a final thing, is there a way obviously people can follow up with you, like an Instagram that you want to share, or anything that, again, maybe the final minute?
Yeah, sure thing. So everything for me is going to be Sin Lagos. If you're out in the city of Austin, I'd love to be able to, get to know you. And I feel like one of my favorite things is to build communities online, but also in real life. I think
Mm.
having a design community is where we get to nerd out over words like keyframes, and very, very important.
And meet in person,
so,
you forget that part. You can actually meet
yeah,
with real
so
tangible
you know,
people.
I'm moving to Austin, Texas, and I think it's going to be such an interesting experience to have that design community. And I love that I still can have a design community online. So really
Nice.
awesome stuff.
Well, Sin, it's been honestly such a pleasure to kind of host you over these 2 days, and just a little recap, I should say, to wrap up for the end of the day. Definitely stick around if you can, because we've got the latest Illustrator Creative Challenge with Jack Watson, immediately followed by designing an artistic zine with Kiana Maria. So definitely stay tuned. Sin, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you yesterday and today. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you have.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. We have quite a unique banter, and I really enjoy it.
I love the banter. You use the word banter. I love that. You're definitely a friend in my book. And of course, a big thank you to everyone that's joined us for 2 days as well. Without you guys, there would be no Adobe Live. So a big thank you to you. A big thank you to the Adobe team, of course. I hope you're feeling inspired, kind of do your own work. And hopefully we'll see you guys very, very soon. So take care, be safe to each other, and see you very, very soon. Bye.
Bye.